just give a warning that I will be talking about a little bit of violence, so if that's not something you want to hear or want your children to hear, I might recommend stepping out for a few minutes. The year was 1896. Chaya and Moshe Zelakovich elatedly welcomed their sixth child, Rivka, into the world in Savran, a village in modern-day Ukraine. Enduring hard years, the family treasured its moments of joy, like when Rivka married Benny Melamed and gave birth to their daughter Betty not long after. But the hardships of life forced Benny to leave on a journey a year after his daughter's birth. Not knowing if he would see his family again, Benny made his way toward Palestine, but ended up in a jail in Alexandria, and then finally came here to the US. He must have been so relieved to be safe, even though he was so far from his wife and his young daughter. Back home, in need of support, Rivka and Betty moved in with Benny's parents in a nearby village named Kashkavata. On a spring day, while the cherries bloomed, a roving gang of neighbors came to shake down the Jews for money. Even though the Jews handed the money over, they were killed anyway. Knowing trouble was at their doorstep, Rivka and Betty hid in the attic. Rivka stuffed cotton balls into her daughter's mouth so her cries would not be heard as the gang murdered her grandparents one floor below. Devastated, their world utterly destroyed, Rivka and Betty began a year-long journey to find a new home, traveling by foot and train across Europe until finally catching a boat to America, to a new home. They endured so much pain and lost so much, all in hopes of finding home. They found it in Brooklyn when they were reunited with Benny. And on October 9th, 1923, Benny and Rivka gave birth to a second child. They named her Chaya, meaning she lives, a symbol of their second chance at life. And 97 years later, to the day, on October 9th, 2020, we welcomed my daughter Maya into this world, named in part for her great-grandmother, Chaya. My family's journey over the last century is a search for home. They learned all too well how impermanent and unstable our homes can be. Only through hard work and struggle did they build a new home. This is my family story, and it is each of our family stories. Whether your family emigrated from Ukraine or from Rhodes, has been here for one generation or 10, came for opportunity or was forcibly brought here, in each generation, we too must search for and create our homes. Contrast my great-grandmother's journey with the journey home many of our children take over the summer. Not across the world, but an hour or so north to Camp Kalsman. That's right. The moment you drive through the gate at camp, you are greeted with the phrase, "Welcome home." While camp is on a beautiful site, home is not about the physical structures, but about the feelings it evokes. Each person I encounter at camp, whether a full-time professional, a lay leader, a summer staffer, says, "Welcome home." That ethos pervades camp. Everyone sees camp as a home, and they understand they have a role in making it feel that way. As a result, happy campers return year after year, and campers feel safe to be their whole selves. When we are home, we feel safe. We can be vulnerable. The smells and sight remind us of our past. Home is where we are loved. Jewishly, we are 5 days away from our holiday that asks of us to build our homes. Not only was Maya born on the same day as her great-grandmother, she was also born on the final day of Sukkot. The Torah instructs us to do 2 things on the holiday of Sukkot. First, we are commanded to live in our sukkah for an entire week. To fulfill that commandment, we must first build a sukkah. But there are all sorts of requirements about what the sukkah must have and not have. It can't have 4 walls. It can't have a covered roof. It shouldn't be attached to any existing structures. It can't even be built underneath a tree. Each rule reinforces the idea that the sukkah is something fragile and not permanent. We eat in the sukkah, we sleep in the sukkah, we decorate it like it's our home. But anyone who has slept in a sukkah knows that to be in the sukkah is to be exposed to the elements. The flimsy structure is meant to be temporary and to force us to consider our own impermanence. And second, we are required to rejoice on this holiday. And in our rejoicing, we are required to invite in guests and share our joy with the most vulnerable. It sounds like an odd recipe for creating a joyful experience, right? You sit in a cold structure that shakes with the wind and soaks with the rain while inviting in strangers. But joy enters precisely because Sukkot is not about the structure itself, but about what we do inside of it, about the home we build when we are vulnerable. To understand the role of home in Judaism, we must go back to the very beginning of the Jewish people. Our forefather Abraham starts his story by running away from his home, from everything he has known, following God. As a reward for his faith, multiple times God promises the land of Israel as an inheritance to Abraham's children. But why did God choose Abraham in the first place? The Torah details the way Abraham made his home open to others. We read in Genesis 18, "The day was getting hot. Abraham sat at the entrance of his tent, and there he encountered God. And suddenly he saw 3 men approaching. As soon as he saw them, he ran out of his tent to greet them. And he said, 'You must be tired, and you must be hungry, you must be hot. I'll bring some water, I'll wash your feet, and you can relax in the shade. I'll grab some food, eat as much as you want, stay as long as you want, and then leave when you're ready. I am so glad you came by my home.' And then Abraham activates his household. He goes to his wife Sarah and he says, 'Sarah, grab some flour, make some cakes.' He goes to his herd. He takes a calf. He slaughters it. He gives it to his servant and says, 'Prepare this meat.' And then Abraham takes the curds and the milk and he serves his guests in the shade. In the heat of the day, Abraham and his family pull out all the stops to welcome their guests. Through his actions, Abraham was telling his guests, 'Welcome home.' Reading this story, the medieval scholar Rashi asks, why was Abraham sitting at the door of his tent in the first place, and not inside his tent where he was safe and in the shade and cooler? Rashi answers, saying Abraham did so in order to welcome strangers immediately. Additionally, Rashi teaches that Abraham positioned his tent in a central place in camp and rolled up its 4 sides. This way he could see travelers coming from any direction, and all would feel welcome approaching an open tent. Such was the extent of Abraham's desire to offer hospitality. So important is Abraham's open tent hospitality in Jewish tradition that the chuppah, the wedding canopy, is said to be open on all four sides to represent Abraham's tent. The chuppah symbolizes the home a couple is creating together. In hearkening us back to Abraham, we are reminded that the ideal home is one that is open to others. Our understanding of the Jewish home is also fundamentally influenced by the Romans destroying the symbolic Jewish home, the Second Temple, in 70 CE. As a result, we could no longer practice Judaism in a central place in Jerusalem. The rabbis innovated, creating two loci of religious practice: the home and the synagogue, two small-scale temples called Mikdash Me'at. Now the duties of living and practicing Judaism were split between the home and the synagogue. No longer would people sacrifice an animal on Passover in Jerusalem. Now they would host a Seder in their home and pray together at the synagogue. These two spaces were now the important places of gathering. In his book, The Great Good Place, sociologist Ray Oldenburg laid out not two, but three important spaces where we spend our time and interact socially. The first is the home. The second is work. And then there are third spaces. They're not where you live, nor where you work. They include cafes, gyms, community centers, parks, and religious institutions, like synagogues. Oldenburg argues that third places play a vital role in the function of a society. They are anchors of community life, a place for meeting new people and increasing social bonds. According to journalist Rebecca White, your third place is where you relax in public, where you encounter familiar faces and make new acquaintances. But our homes and our third spaces don't always function the way they should or could. We are still experiencing the effects and trauma of COVID and the isolation it demanded of us. Those years of isolation eroded so much of the hospitality of home. Instead of a first, second, and third place, many of us had one place, our homes. It's where we slept, where we ate, we worked, if we were lucky enough to have a job and one that we could perform remotely, and socialized. Everything melted together. Do you remember those days before we had vaccines? We washed our groceries before bringing them inside. Before seeing someone, we asked them to isolate for 14 days. We kept our circles small, only encountering a few folks over the course of a week, or maybe even a month. We forgot how to welcome others home. And this only exacerbated social trends. 2 decades before COVID, Robert Putnam published his book, Bowling Alone, describing the declining rates of community engagement among Americans. The book's title is derived from the phenomenon of an increase in people bowling, while rates of participation in bowling leagues fell. In other words, people were still bowling, they just weren't doing it with other people, or at least without the social interaction inherent to a league. I might call it the DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats phenomenon today. And don't get me wrong, I love the convenience of food delivery. It powered us through Maya's early days and plenty of tough days. But when I don't eat at a restaurant, when I don't go inside to grab the food I'm taking to go, when I don't even see my delivery driver, I miss the opportunity to say hello to someone I recognize, to run into an old friend, to get to know the workers. We are losing the small moments of connection where community is built. Putnam argues this is representative of much in our society. Whatever people are doing, it is less in community than it once was. But it doesn't have to be this way. If we internalize the lessons of Abraham and of the Sukkah, we know to build homes that are welcoming and inviting. Yes, this applies to our first spaces, our homes where we live. They are places in which we can welcome the community. But I want to focus on the third space, this space where we can welcome the sense of home into our communal place. As I hope you are aware, we're in the midst of a capital campaign to revitalize the Seattle campus. As we look to updating this physical space, we can start the work now to open the sides of our welcoming tent. The Sukkah is only complete when community gathers inside. Rabbi Alan Liu teaches that none of us is whole by ourselves, and this understanding is the basis for spiritual community. We all seem to know in the deepest part of ourselves that we need to be a part of something larger than ourselves to be complete. And we have opportunities right here to create this sense of wholeness. 100 years ago, my family fled Ukraine searching for safety. I'm only a few generations removed from their struggles. Right now, there are families around the world seeking to find a home of safety. Thanks to some amazing leaders here at Temple, we are in the process of hosting a refugee family. We will provide housing for them, help them find work, and ease their transition to life here. I can't imagine a better way to fulfill the mitzvah of welcoming in guests. We'll need help raising money to provide housing and more. We'll need people to organize drives and deliver goods. We need you to help build a home for this family. And we need one more person to step up and be a leader on the team organizing the effort here. Please find me if that's you. We're also starting Connections at Temple, an infrastructure for building relationships within our larger Temple community. In addition to the ways that sisterhood and brotherhood have been gathering, a few new groups led by passionate lay leaders are already meeting, including a group for Jews by choice, people who have converted to Judaism, as well as a group called Tapuzim, for members of our community who identify as LGBTQ+. By the secular new year, we aim to have infrastructure ready to support a wide variety of people gathering, whether you share a particular identity or share an interest in an activity. What makes these groups and this model unique is that it is all about forming relationships. Like a sukkah, these groups require building. It's up to you to form a group, and we are here to support you along the way. Now, why might you want to be a part of one of these groups? Priya Parker, author of The Art of Gathering, describes the many reasons that we come together. She writes, "We gather to solve problems we can't solve on our own. We gather to celebrate, to mourn, and to mark transitions. We gather to make decisions. We gather because we need each other. We gather to show strength. We gather to honor and acknowledge. We gather to build. We gather to welcome, and we gather to say goodbye." Whether you are gathering to go hiking or play board games, whether you want to bake or watch baseball, whether you want to ski down a mountain with fellow Jews or read a book together, whether you want to build or woodwork or craft and make art, whether you want to gather with fellow Microsoft employees or people whose families are multi-heritage or multi-faith, you might gather with other parents of young children or fellow retirees. Let's play more together. These lay-led groups will provide a space to connect with people who share something in common with you, all within our Temple family and Jewish context. And there are so many more opportunities to welcome people home in our Temple community. If you see someone you don't know at services, introduce yourself. You don't need to ask if they're new here. Just ask them their name and what's bringing them here. You can reach out to fellow parents in your children's religion school class to plan a play date. Take ownership of the programs you attend. Invite your people to join. Say hello to others. See how you can be helpful. You have the power to welcome others home. Imagine it's your first time at Temple. You don't know anyone. And you walk through the doors on a Friday night and see a room full of people engaged in conversation. You feel lost, and you wonder if you should have even come. Or imagine it's your first time here. You walk in the door, and immediately someone introduces themselves and asks, "What's bringing you here tonight?" How different would that feel? Imagine missing Torah study or a weekly class and then receiving 2 texts from your classmates asking if everything is okay. Imagine if no one reached out. Imagine you come to services and before the Kaddish you mention a name. After services, someone comes up to you and says, "Who are you remembering tonight?" And you say, "My dad died a year ago and I'm feeling sad." And they say, "Tell me a story about him." You have the power to welcome others home. This year, Maya will help us decorate our sukkah. She will eat in it. She may get rained on. And she will be the next link in a chain that includes Chaya, Betty, and Rivka, who sought to create a home amidst the destabilizing winds of the world. At Temple, we too have the opportunity to continue the work of Abraham, building a tent, a home, welcome to all those in our community. This year, may we dedicate ourselves to using our words and our actions to welcome each other home and to make Temple a home for all. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will.